Hey folks, gonna do another video here starting the sort of gameplay for War Rune Second Edition. Um, this video will cover phases 1 and 2. I'll do one video on movement, another video on combat, and then the last couple phases will probably be in a video by themselves. So that being said, let's just dive into the game. Phase 1 is called Direct National Economy. This is where you're going to gain your resources for the turn. Everybody basically does this simultaneously. There are two steps to it, and I'll go over those right now. So, step 1 is basically you're going to check to make sure that all of your cards are flipped to their correct side. If any of these countries currently has a battle going on, they're embattled, they would have to be flipped over to the opposite side. And if we would flip over, let's say we flip over Poland, Slovakia, and Hungary here, pull them out, slide them back in here, you'll see the caution, the red caution at the top, and their resource production may have changed. I don't remember what it was on the other side, but it may have changed. Strategic value is never going to change. But they may have produced oil and now they don't, or these two may have been reduced. So you'll look out on your main board on the map and you'll look for those hotspot tokens. And those hotspot tokens look like that. Only they're going to be on that side. That's going to indicate they are embattled, like an ongoing battle for that area. So you'll look for every one of these you have out on the map, and you'll look at the country that it's in, and then you'll make sure that country card is flipped to this side for whatever player controls that country or that territory. I keep calling them countries. They're not countries, they're territories. So that's step 1, to make sure that all your cards match up to your embattled tokens. Go ahead and flip this back over, because it does not start. There are, I think, 2 or 3 territories that do start embattled. I believe they are over in the Pacific between the United States and the Japanese, but I don't think anything out in the European campaign starts embattled anywhere. I'm looking real quick, but I don't see anything here on the map that I set up in the last video. Regardless to say, you're quickly gonna have embattled territories. So this is very important to make sure that you're gonna want to make sure that this is done so that you deprive your opponents of resources they may gain that they shouldn't if there's a battle going on in their territory. Step 2 is then to tally the resources. Now you don't do this on step 1, because you're already marked with your starting resources on your resource track here, and there's different letters out here. So for the European or war in Europe, which is going to be indicated by this E, that's where these pegs would start on the E. That's the map that I had set up in the previous video. If you're playing the global war campaign, it's this blacked out corner, which matches up with the war for Europe, at least for Germany. The other factions may not match, the war in Europe versus the global war, because Germany wasn't involved in the Pacific, so etc. Then there's the smaller map, the Eastern Front, which it just involves basically Russia, Britain, Germany, and Italy. I don't think the U.S. is in there. I know they start with troops in Britain, but I'm not sure how that works out. But that's the smaller one. That's the EF. A is for the African campaign, and then, well, they're not involved in the Pacific campaign, so the P's don't show up on here. But you're going to look down your card list. You're going to gather your resources, your income. So, for instance, if we look at Germany here, they start with 3, 4, 7, 10, 12, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 OSR resources. So we go over here to the OSR column, and they start with 19. So that's accurate. And you count each one. So at the end of, or at the beginning of each turn or round, however you want to call it, for the game, you're going to calculate how many resources you gain. You don't do this for the first round because it indicates your starting resources there. But that's pretty much it for phase one, directing national economy. That's basically just gathering your resources for the upcoming turn. There are a few things to note here about China. China cannot spend or gain oil during the game, so they're never going to have gaining oil. They can never bid oil for turn order, which we're going to go over in the next phase here. They can produce infantry and artillery. They can never produce naval or air units. I don't think they can produce armor units either. I don't think so. And they cannot take over. Like if Japan is producing units in their capital, in the capital of China, they have control over it, and they're producing air or naval units. If China takes them over, China does not gain control of those air and naval units. They are unable to have air and naval units at all through the game. And that's pretty much all phase one. So it's pretty quick. Everybody can do it simultaneously. You might want to spot check a few people if you don't trust them. But you should be able to trust your fellow players, right? In a game of war. All right, so moving on. So phase two is the strategic planning phase. This is where you're going to go to your OMP charts. Each nation is going to go to their OMP charts, and they're going to write their orders down. They're also going to bid for turn order. For this example, I'm just going to be showing this is the dry erase board. I don't want to waste a pad, because I'm going to write on it, and we'll show some moves and whatnot. So this all happens simultaneously. It's recommended, obviously, that the Axis players all go off, separately or allied, however you want to do it. The two sides need to separate so they can discuss amongst themselves what their plans are, where they plan to move, etc. There are two reference boards, one that each side can take, that has a smaller version of the map, with all the IDs, so they can kind of know ahead of time like how they want to map out their moves. You're going to write all your orders down. You're essentially going to come back. You're going to reveal your bids and such, do the turn order, and then pay for your turn, however much you bid oil for turn order. So when you write an order, you're going to write the command at the top, and then below the arrow you're going to write the ID of where they are going to move. So let's talk about movement real quick. Land units can move one adjacent space on land. They can take rail. So if they are in a territory that has a railroad in it, they can travel along that railroad as far as they want, as long as they are unimpeded. So what would impede them? Well, if an enemy controls a territory that their rail goes through, they will not be able to use that rail. They will not be able to trace a path through that territory. If the enemy controls it, even if the enemy has troops in it, it's going to stop your movement. not only does it stop your movement, it's going to cancel the entire order. I'll go over that a little more in depth when we get to the next phase, which is actually doing the moves. Land units can move off of a territory into a sea hex. They can become a convoy or a troop transport. Sorry. They can become a troop transport, and they can move up to 2 as long as the first space is into sea. So they can sort of gain the naval movement. Naval units or sea units can move two spots away. And the board is set up in such a way that normally you're going to have 2 different paths to get to a area in the sea. So if your opponent blocks one of your paths, you can always take the other path. You don't have to. You indicate on here where you're going to go, not the path you're going to take. There are some other movement rules which I will go over once we get to that whole movement phase. But just know that you're going to be planning at the top here. You're going to put your command number, the stack of units you're going to move, the command, and then where the ID of the space they're moving to, whether it's sea or another land space. When these get resolved, they get resolved from left to right, top to bottom. So you'll do this one, 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 and this one. If you decided to use all 9, you don't have to. You can only issue orders to 1 command group per turn. So if you issue an order to the 48th group in this box, and then you absent-mindedly issue another order to it down in this box, this order will be automatically canceled once we get down there. Any illegal moves are going to get canceled. So if you try to move a land unit more than 1 space away, and they don't have a rail connection, that order is going to be canceled. It's an illegal move. It's just canceled. You just lose the move. I think that pretty much covers it for the orders here. The other thing you're going to do is you're going to be bidding for turn order. So you will place a bid an amount of oil up here, and that's going to be how much oil you are going to pay at the end of this phase, at the strategic planning phase, regardless of where you fall in the order. So that's pretty much step 1 for the strategic planning phase. One other thing to keep in mind is that during just this step 1, just this first part of the strategic planning phase, when you're writing your order and you're writing your bid for your oil bid, you can announce a command split or a command merger. That's where you would take a stack of units and split it into 2, or take 2 stacks and put it into 1. When you announce that, you will immediately do that on the board. It's not something where you can announce it and then wait until everybody has their orders in place and then say, oh, well, no, I'm not really going to split it. If you say you're going to do it, you have to do it. And then you have to allow the appropriate amount of time for the other side to adjust based off of your merger or your split. But it can be seen as a way to sort of bluff. You might want to split up a command stack into 2 and try to make your enemies then going to have to decide, well, is he going to go this way or is he going to go that way now? Before, when it was just 1 stack, I was pretty sure he was just going to come into this territory here, but now he has 2 stacks. Is he going to come into this territory or is he going to come into these other 2 territories? That type of thing. If you're splitting a stack, you do have spare commands that you can put out, but you are limited to the commands that you have. So if you don't have any other commands to place out, you cannot split a command. You can merge commands, but you will not be able to split a command. So that pretty much covers that for that step 1. Once everybody has all of these locked in. They've made all of their moves, and they're bid for their oil, and everybody is in agreement that everybody's done. Then no other commands can be written, no other splits or mergers can be done. That's it. At least in this point in time. You can't do splits and mergers once you reveal, and start making your moves and such. So that's step one. Now, the next step in this phase is to reveal your bids, and you establish turn order. So everybody shows what they bid for oil. You can, at this point, you could reveal your moves too. It doesn't really matter at this point because they're finalized. Each player reveals how much oil they bid. Highest number gets first choice. That player gets to choose what order they go in the turn. So it's not, you're not bidding to go first. You're bidding to choose where you go in turn order, or where your nation goes in turn order. If multiple players bid the same amount, then the turn order tokens are basically randomly drawn. They're shuffled and randomly drawn, and the first one that's drawn gets first choice, and then the second person gets second choice. You're probably going to have to do that multiple times because people are just going to bid same amounts of oil that other people bid. China always bids 0. And if somebody bids 0, you can bid 0 oil. You do not have to bid any oil. You can just put a 0 there. If you bid 0 oil, it's the same as China. Then the same thing happens. Your flag gets mixed up with the Chinese flag, and randomly drawn. So China might be able to come out ahead of you. I think basically whoever's playing as China will be able to decide where they're gonna go in the turn order. But if everybody bids at least 1 oil, then China's going to be the last to choose their turn order, essentially. And they're not going to really choose. They're just going to have what's left. Then you pay for your oil. So whatever you bid on your oil, you will subtract from your resource, your pegboard that has your resources. You must be able to pay for your bid. You cannot make a bid that you cannot pay for. If you do, actually, I'm not sure they say what happens. I would imagine it's just a 0 bid, and you just are gonna be a draw out of the hat with the China. Determine what order you go, or what order you choose. And I think that pretty much covers it for strategic planning phase 2. We can cover let me go over the movements a little more here. Let me pause this and get the camera set up. All right, I think this will give us a pretty decent overview of how things are going to work with the various pieces of movement. So there's a couple things with movement that you have to keep in mind when you're making your orders. Like I stated before, land units can only go from one territory to an adjacent territory. Air units can travel to, I believe, yes, 1 or 2, land or sea. Naval units can travel 1 or 2. Land units, rail movements. So you'll see that here in Greater Germany, there's several rail lines in and out of the territory, right? So we have a rail that connects over here into the Balkans, and then up here into Bulgaria, Romania. So the 48th command here could write a movement of moving the 48th to G5, and they would do that via this rail. Or they could do it through this rail. So there's multiple paths. If there were an enemy unit in here, they would not be able to use this path. They would be forced to use this path. If, let's say both of these territories are friendly, right? But Germany goes behind Russia, and Russia has moved down here, and Russia has moved units into Poland, Slovakia, and Hungary, and the British have moved units into the Balkans. They then can't take either path. They could potentially go up here, and then over to here, and then over to here, and then down to Bulgaria, Romania. But that would assume that no enemy units were in any of these territories for that long around the bend path. They wouldn't have one of these direct paths there. If there is a bomb token, so if a country's infrastructure has been bombed, they have the bomb token out here. This indicates that the rail infrastructure can't be used. Any ports on that territory, you lose the port advantage when you're doing battling. That allows you to repair naval ships for free, among other things. But for movement wise, this means you can't use rails in this territory if it's out there. And like I said, that you cannot go through a territory that has enemy units or that is controlled by an enemy nation. If you don't have a path anymore, you have to cancel that order. You don't get a partial movement up to the blockage point. So if we were going to move from Greater Germany all the way up here to Belarus, and then for whatever reason these two countries are taken, every path is blocked off, we would not be able to take like a partial movement as far as we could get and then stop. We just don't move at all for the land units. I don't know why I was pointing at the air units. You can travel out by rail of a contested territory, but pinning rules will apply. I'll get to pinning in a second. Just know that if you're leaving by rail or you're leaving by just normal adjacent movement out of a territory with a land unit, pinning rules will apply. The next thing to discuss is land units moving out into the sea. So like I said, they can become troop transports. So the 72nd here could move out into the sea. They could, if you're moving from land to sea, and sea is your first move, then you get two movements as long as the second one stays in sea. So you can go 1, 2. They can move out here to A4. You cannot see that. They could move here into A6. So this stack of troop transports could go here into A6. At that point, they're going to be pinned by the British here, so they would not do that. They could move into M1 and then move into I'm assuming that's 2. Yes, M2 right here. But they're vulnerable. Troop transport is basically always pinned by enemy units, except other troop transports, and they cannot pin anything else. So a troop transport can't be used to pin any naval units or air units or anything like that. They do not participate in battle. If a enemy unit moves into a troop transport that is in a sea space, then there's not really a battle that takes place. That troop transport is just lost. Make sure that is accurate. Yep, they will be sunk. Um, if a battle takes place and both sides are equally destroyed, so both sides lose all their combat units, all their naval units and their air units in the battle, then the troop transport would survive and would still stay there, even if there was an opposing troop transport with it. We did talk about the pinning. They can never pin, but they will be pinned. Pinning rules will apply if they're moving from a territory to a sea territory. So you do have to follow pinning rules. But your basic pinning rules are if your move is moving you through or out of a territory that has a number of enemy units, you have to leave behind a number of matching enemy units to deal with that force. But then the rest of yours can come out. And that is, it's equal to the number of units, not type. So, you can leave behind, if there's a single enemy armor unit in your territory, you can leave behind one infantry to deal with it, and you don't have to leave one of your armor behind. The only other exception for troop transports is if you are in a sea space. So you can move once you have a transport out in the sea, you can move back onto land, but you have to start adjacent to that land. So the only way you would be able to come back into France here from M1 is you would have to start adjacent here. If somebody was over here in M2, they'd first have to move to M1 and their move turn, and then on the next turn they could move into France. Now, transports can ignore pinning rules if they are doing that. If you are going from a sea space into a land space, you can ignore all pinning rules. So if you have your troop transport here, and then an enemy moves into into M1 to try to pin you, you can ignore that pin and move into France on that turn or your next turn, depending on when the order is made. But that's only if the land territory you're moving into is friendly. So that does not apply if it's an unfriendly. So if you were moving into Spain, Spain starts neutral. You would have to. This would be a battle, so you would not be able to ignore pinning rules. Actually, you might not even be able to invade from sea. You kind of have to be able to, I guess. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything that says you can't invade by sea. Only move to one adjacent territory. Yeah, so you can invade by sea. So that covers the troop transports. Next thing is air. Air can move, the circle units can move one or two spaces over land or sea. When you So air units can move one or two, land or sea. After you move a land unit, you're going to put down a air tag token, and they are double-sided, one for the Axis, one for the Allies, on top of that unit to indicate that unit has moved. You'll also put these down if that unit engages in a battle, but does not move during this phase, but engages in a battle. They will get a air tag marker. This is your indicator that these units. Actually, nope, that's the wrong token. That's the carrier token. Here are the air tag tokens. They have the arrows. You will put that down onto a unit that has moved in this phase, or engages in a battle in a subsequent phase. This is your indication that this unit needs to move again during phase 5. So basically, air units can possibly move twice per round. If they move during this phase, and then they get a second movement in phase 5. Air units can never pin or be pinned, so even air units over transports, I don't think they can. I don't think air units can pin transports either. They cannot. So air units never they can never be pinned or pin anything. And then lastly, naval commands can move. Naval units can move one or two sea spaces. They cannot move into these circles that indicate they're like land masses. So like the Iceland here, or Sardinia here, or Crete over here. There's Malta here. They can't move into these spaces. They're strictly sea. This is not considered sea. This is considered land. So a troop transport can move from A7 into here. They don't have to move into the light blue water surrounding it. They just move straight onto the island from the major sea space. Let's see. What are some other rules? Movement rules. We should probably discuss the natural, I think they're called natural sea spaces, passages, narrow sea passages. There's several of them. There's one here. There is one over here. There's one over here. And so for the one here in Egypt, it's completely in Egypt. So in order to use this to go from M5 to M3 or vice versa, you have to have control of Egypt. Otherwise, you can't traverse that. Same thing for Turkey. In order to go from M4 to M3, you have to have control of Turkey. Now, let's look at the area here, coming into into A5 here. In order to go from A6 to A5, this is technically a narrow sea passage. You'll see that there is a circle on either side, a large circle. I think you can see that. The large circle, so whatever side the large circles are on, indicates that you would have to have control of both of those territories. So in order to come from A6 to A5, you have to control Norway, and you have to control Greater Germany. Denmark. There is another one here somewhere. Here, nope, that one's off map or off screen. There are a couple that only have the big circle on one side, and that indicates you just have to have control of that side of the passage. You don't have to control both sides. So that's how the narrow sea passages work. I think that covers all the movement things we need to go over in terms of writing your orders for phase 2. I think that's pretty much going to cover this video. We talked about pinning. So pinning applies to land units and naval units. Does not apply to air units. Um, yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So again, if we switch over here to the O&P chart, um, when you do your orders, I'm just going to pull this off for a second so I can write on it here easily. Let's say I want to take the 72nd, and we're going to move them down into N11, and then we will move the 11th Airborne or Air Command. We'll move them up to G7, etc. And then we could take, well, those two are enough. So here's sort of how you would write your orders. You'll have to excuse my messy handwriting. You'll write your command at the top where you want them to move. Again, command at the top where you want them to move. I'll go over these in a little more detail in the next phase. In fact, I'll probably just keep these because it'll initiate some battles and whatnot. Then you're going to bid for oil. You're going to make sure you have a bid up there for oil that you can actually pay for. But that pretty much covers phase 1 and 2. So phase 1, just to recap, phase 1 was the economy, direct national economy. That's where you're going to gather your resources. You're going to make sure your all your cards are flipped to the appropriate sides based off the embattled tokens that are out on the board. Then you're going to go to your O&P chart, go off in your separate areas. You're going to discuss with your teammates. You're going to write your orders down. You're going to bid for oil. You're going to make sure that you can pay for that oil. Then you're going to reveal your bids. You're going to determine turn orders. So the highest bid gets to determine where they go first, then the second highest bid, so forth and so on. If multiple players bid the same amount of oil, then those flags are taken into a bag or randomly drawn somehow, a roll of a die, however you want to do it, to determine which of those players involved with that tie gets to choose first. And you set your turn order, and then that pretty much finishes phase 1 and 2. Phase 3 is going to start the movement, and that's the next video I'm going to be making. I think I'll probably just start that right about now. So thanks for watching, guys.